Do the shit until they murder me.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another World of Tanks console video. My name is Zinozach, and today's video is going to be on the Scourge Kirovets-1, brand new tier 8 Russian premium heavy tank that has just recently been introduced in the past weeks. Now I am covering this a little bit late, apologies for that, but as always these videos will be coming out at a slower pace just because of, well, personal stuff. But nevertheless, we're going to be looking at the in-game armor model viewer of the game. The in-game model of the tank. And first and foremost, that bright white stripe that goes all along this tank makes it one of the more unique things of it. I have to say that a lot of people, when they saw me play this tank, kind of figured that this was the only tank that has a unique racing stripe. Made it kind of stood out a little bit more. The log on the side unfortunately doesn't count as spaced armor, just an extra wiggly bit that they decided to put on there. However, it's only on that side, the other side is empty, but as I said, it doesn't really count for anything in the armor spacing at all. However, you will notice that this tank might look similar, or at least familiar to some cases. That is because the turret of the tank is based off of the IS-3. Fairly noticeable from the get-go. And then the hull of this tank is actually what the IS-3 was based on. And if you want to know about that part, well, then simply hit the detail screen and go into the overview. According to the text on the side, it was basically just a prototype, basically the first prototype of what the IS-3 was supposed to be. However, now we know that the IS-3 has actually been changed to a more pike-nosed version, so at least you get to see what the first prototype of that was. However, that's enough rambling. We're going to head on over into the tank comparison to get a look at what this bad boy stacks up to. So, moving into the tank comparison for the Scourge Kirovets, we're going to be going and comparing it to the Object 252U Defender, as I feel like currently this would probably be the tank that would most likely be its top competitor, as it was also recently introduced as far as the tier 8 heavy Soviet tanks. So that's also an easier base to go off rather than comparing it to some of the older ones that have been in the game a little bit longer. So, firepower stat for these tanks. The Kirovets-1 has a 42 firepower stat. Unfortunately, it loses out by 1 point to the Object 252U Defender, or just the 252U with 43. Now, the Defender, this is the stats for the Defender, and the Object 252U, it's exactly the same tank, just to give you guys a quick heads up. However, the only thing that would be different would be the camo or concealment factor for these compared to the base tank. However, everything else maintains the same for stats. So, both tanks use a 122 caliber gun. However, the base reload on the Kirovets is actually better with it, with 13 seconds, beating out the Defender's base 15.5 second reload. With the better reload, of course, you're going to get a better base rate of fire, with 4.62 for the Kirovets and 3.87 for the Defender. Now, the reason you don't see the penetration highlighting one or the other being better is, first off, let's talk about the type of ammunition that the Kirovets has. Its standard ammunition is APCR, similar to that of the Fatherland, or I think the Fatherland uses it, the IS-3A, which is the same tank. The IS-5, I'm not too sure. With its premium ammunition being heat, and of course every tank just stays with HE compared to the British, who use HESH. The base penetration, even though it's using APCR for the Kirovets, is 221, and unfortunately for that, the base penetration on the Defender beats it out by just ever so slightly with 225. However, the penetration with their premium ammunition differs, because the Kirovets, with its heat heat penetration actually takes this one. The Defender uses APCR, so it only goes up ever so slightly to 265. So there's that 5 millimeter difference in penetration for the different types of ammunition used. The penetration on the HE for the Defender is actually higher with 68, beating out the Kirovets-1. Now, again, the Defender's unique thing with, or unique stance with its gun is that it uses a tier 10 gun. I believe the Kirovets uses the tier 9 122, with 390 alpha being the typical standard alpha damage for that, whereas the Defender uses a tier 10 122, which lands it with the 440 alpha damage on both its standard rounds. However, their HE rounds for both tanks will still do 530, and I found that very odd. I don't know why that is. It just seems like their the standard ammunition is the only thing that differs in that. However, your shell costs will also affect your earnings for this tank. 1,180 silver for its APCR base round, 5,200 for its premium rounds, and 608 for the Kirovets. So it's a little bit high as far as cost. And that's where I think the Defender has a little bit of a leeway. 1,025 silver for its AP round, 4,800 for its APCR, and 608 608 for its HE round. So the HE rounds on both tanks cost the same. However, because of those different shell types for their base ammunition or their primary ammunition, that's what causes the differ in cost. However, when you have a base APCR having being your base shell, you do get better shell velocity because APCR has the fastest velocity for type of ammunition, with 1,400 meters a second on the standard shell for the Kirovets, and that really does help you when it comes with using that 122. The Defender unfortunately falls down to 1,000 meters a second for its AP rounds, which isn't too bad for an AP round. Not the best. I think there are some other tanks that do pick up from that. However, 820 meters, and I don't know why this says 82. Let me go over here. The 820 meters a second is the standard shell velocity for the heat round. So there's a significant drop from that 1,400 meters with the APCR to that heat round. Keep that in mind when you're switching to use your to penetrate targets at a longer distance. And 790, it drops even further from that 1,400 that you're firing with the HE round. So keep that in mind. The different type of ammunition that you select, your APCR will definitely have that bigger leeway within shell velocity, and you switching to your premium round doesn't necessarily help it, although with the penetration you might want to, but that shell velocity again drops, and it drops even more with the HE. The Defender doesn't necessarily suffer from that because, again, it's going from an AP round to an APCR. 1,000 meters a second jumps up to 1,250 meters a second. However, the HE round on the Defender also drops all the way down to 700, which is even lower than the Kirovets HE round. Interesting take on the different types of shells being used here. Both tanks are still limited to 30 rounds of ammunition in their tank, which I think is pretty much common among the IS series of tanks. I don't know why. Maybe that's just something that Wargaming came up with as a limit, because they do use 122s. Anyway, moving on, to DPM of the tank for the Kirovets is 1,801.8, and that beats out the Defender again. Better rate of fire, better reload. The Defender, although it has a bigger alpha, lands at 1,702.8. Now, the aim time for this tank is 3.10 seconds, beating out the 3.40 or 3.4 on the Defender. Now, that's pretty good for a 122, and I believe the only thing that would beat this right now is the STG, which I don't remember exactly, but I think it's around 2.6, 2.7 seconds aim time. Don't quote me on that. I just know that the STG Guard, even with a 122, has currently the best aim time with a 122 that I know of. Moving on, the dispersion for this tank is also very great, 0.45, which is standard for 122 at 100 meters, 0.68 when moving the turret, and 0.79 when rotating when moving the tank with 0.68, and when rotating the turret, it's at 0.79. So that's pretty good stats for 122. Again, with the bigger your caliber gun, you're going to have those bigger blooms when you're turning the tank and trying to aim for those precision shots. And the Defender, unfortunately, doesn't fall any better in that category. 0.47 at 100 meters, 0.71 when moving the tank, and 0.81 when rotating the turret. However, in gun elevation, you can get 2 extra degrees on the Defender's gun compared to the Kirovets. Stops at 18, the Defender gets 20, and gets 1 extra degree of gun depression, 6 degrees for the Defender, 5 for the Kirovets. So it's only slightly, but it's those slight edges in degrees that always help you when being able to get some tricky shots in. The hull traverse for the Kirovets is locked at 26, and the Defender actually has a slightly beat out with 28. The turret traverse for both tanks is 24. And I don't know if that's because the turret for the Kirovets is based off the IS-3. I don't remember what the Defender is. I think it's unique, but it has a similar shape, and I assume that's the reason, just because of the turret design. Mobility stat, the Kirovets with 20 beats out the 15 that's on the Defender. The Defender has a great alpha. Unfortunately, that's pretty much what's carrying the tank along. The engine power for the Kirovets is 720, and the Defender is 700. However, the Kirovets gets a 15.16 horsepower to ton weight ratio, so it's able to get up to its speed a little bit better than the 13.59 of the Defender. I keep missing stats and finding stuff while I'm going through. Both tanks have a relatively low 5% chance, 15. It's better than the average, I believe, is 20% for most premium tanks. Whenever you see a 10%, you pretty much swap out the fire extinguisher for the nation consumable. In most cases, that's just my honest opinion. Whenever you have that low of 5% chance, it's better off just doing that, especially with your tier 8, since they have a increased silver earning already. 15% is still pretty good, so you have that option. It's your choice whether you choose to swap it out or keep it, but again, in my opinion, because it's 15, I would suggest swapping it out just for the extra capabilities that you can get with the tank. The top forward speed for the Kirovets is at 42 kilometers per hour, beating out the 35 on the Defender. 20 in reverse as well, beating out the 14 on the Defender. The terrain resistance for this tank is actually fairly good as well, with 1 on hard, 1.1 on medium, and 2 on soft. Beating out the Defender with 1.2 on hard, 1.5 on medium, and 2.3. So it's ever so slightly, but this is what helps this tank get be a little bit, I guess, at an advantage compared to the Defender when comparing the tanks as stats. Health of these tanks, the Kirovets is actually beating on this one. I didn't notice this. 1550 HP is what the Kirovets has, and the Defender is locked at 1500, so 50 extra hit points for a tier 8. It's pretty good, actually. No, 1550 is, I think, one of the highest, or 1575. Don't quote me on those. I always forget. There's some tanks that I keep missing when I try to go through my head as fast as possible for getting those, so don't quote me on it necessarily. But 1550 is relatively good. Overall armor thickness 16 to 195 for the Kirovets, and 15 to 250 millimeters for the Defender. And if you've watched any of my other tank comparisons, you'll know that most of the Defender's armor thickness or effective armor comes from its turret. Overall hull armor thickness 140 on the front for the Kirovets. You'll remember that I explained the design of the tank kind of resembles that of the IS-6, where it's a little bit more front on the, or angled on the front, whereas it doesn't take the traditional IS series with the pike nose that most of the IS series gets. The Kirovets, even though I think it was the original design for the IS-3, didn't necessarily carry over the pike nose design yet. 130 on the Defender. Now keep in mind, I've gone over the Defender stats before, and 130, even though the front of the hull is that thick, the angling of the hull is what generates the effective armor thickness of these. And I wish, again, they would update this for us, so that I'd be able to perfectly show you that although this is thicker, the angle that the 130 is at for the defender kind of makes it a little bit better than the overall armor thickness. But the overall armor thickness helps when it comes to the 3 caliber rule, but there's nothing that'll ever overmatch with a 3 caliber rule for the 100, anything over 100 millimeters. Both tanks have 100 millimeters of armor on the sides, 90 for the defender when it comes to the rear. The Kirovets only has 60, so keep that in mind. That can be penetrated by a lot of tanks. I think your tier 6 will be able to go through it fairly easy. The front of the turret for the Kirovets is 195. Now, you'll see a little bit better of that in the armor model viewer where I go over the different shapes of that, but the overall gist is that Defender has 250 millimeters of a frontal turret armor thickness, so it's very good. 150 on the sides again with the sloping on that. 120 for the Kirovets is still not that bad. Both tanks to the rear of it has 100 millimeters of turret armor thickness. A concealment stat is 22 for the Scourge Kirovets. With when stationary 0.13 and when moving 0.08. The defender beats it out ever so slightly. Again, I'm taking this off the defender, not the standard Object 252U. 24 with 14 when stationary and 0.08 when moving. Spotting stat, the defender falls back with 62, the Scourge Kirovets has 67, and that's because it gets a better base view range with 360, defender is locked at 350. The base radio range for both tanks is still 730, so keep that in mind. Tank costs, which is one of the things that people judge their purchases upon, 13,640 base gold for the Scourge Kirovets and 13,940 gold for the Object 252U Defender. I did not get the cost, and I should have gotten the cost for the base Object 252U, but roughly it comes out to about 13,600 gold, I believe. There's only a slight difference between that and the Defender. Both tanks still carry a 50% premium silver bonus, as well as a 15% premium experience bonus for the Scourge Kirovets, and the 10% for the Object 252U Defender, or even the Object 252U. Those are pretty much what you go for when you go at Tier 8. 50%, 60% is normally the average. No, actually, the average is 50% for your premium bonus for silver, and I think it's 10% for the average is 10% for the experience bonus, but I guess 15% for the Scourge Kirovets may help you decide in picking out that tank. Honestly, both tanks are very good, in my opinion. Which would I pick? I'd rather be driving a Defender than a Scourge Kirovets. However, that does not say much, just because again that Defender, I like the alpha damage on it, but the Kirovets isn't going to fall too far behind. Again, that the DPM is a lot higher, so you might be able to out trade a Defender in that case. Keep that in mind when you're choosing these tanks. But without further ado, let's head into the in-game armor model viewer so I can give you a little bit more detail on the sloping of the armor as well as the angles. Alright, so jumping into the in-game armor model viewer for World of Tanks console, you're going to see that the lower part of this is fairly well angled, as well as the upper part. You have about 140 millimeters of armor thickness on the top, and I believe it is 85 millimeters thick on the bottom, or 80, I might be wrong. Keep in mind that, again, Soviet armor is fairly well angled, and while thickness of an armor that the gauge shows on the bottom is how thick it is, effectiveness is determined by the angle. So with effective on the front, I believe you have around 250 when facing this tank frontally, and on the lower plate you have around 200. So a lot of tier 6s and some tier 7s might have a little bit of a hard time going through the lower plate. I don't expect anything with around 190 to have any issues, but that does again show up the fact that the Kirovets in its top tier matchmaking will definitely put up a lot more domination. Now you might be wondering, well, I see it frontally. If you can't aim at the lower plate all that well, where should you aim for it? Well, unfortunately for you, the only part here is this hatch. There is a small window of opportunity right here that I'm showing that is penetratable. The reason I say it's a slight opening is because the wider you go out, the angle of that turret, the shape of that turret, or the commander's hatches on top, the way they're angled as they go around, it raises it to about 280 millimeters of thickness, which was ridiculous, but it makes it feel a little bit uncomfortable that that's pretty much just your small window of opportunity. If you wanted to overmatch this, I believe it's around 35 to 40 millimeters, so you would need about anything with a 120 caliber gun. You'd be able to overmatch the top of the turret. So tier 10s, some tier 8 tank destroyers should be able to go through that. Tier 9 Soviet 122s will definitely go right through the top of this. They should have no problem overmatching that. I'm a little bit confused about this right here. I'm assuming this is just going to count as spaced armor. Yep, just spaced armor, so it definitely won't matter as far as... Yeah, that shouldn't... I think it's just spaced armor there. So even if you shoot here, the thickness behind it definitely doesn't really help. Side scraping. So you might be wondering, well, if it's bad, if it's great frontally, maybe it's bad at side scraping. However, that's not the case. Soviet tanks never really lacked when it comes to side scraping. KV-5 ultimate side scraper. However, the Kirovets does put up a great fight here. If you keep it around 30 to 40 degrees as your side scraping should be, this right here is impenetrable. It pretty much skyrockets from the front all the way to the top to around 800 effective armor thickness, which pretty much means that there's nothing that'll be able to even begin to contest the side of that. You can overmatch this bar right here. I believe it's 85 millimeters thick, and so because of this little bar here, if you have anything with 3 caliber rule, what is that? 85, 170. Man, I'm bad at math. 170. So there's nothing in this game that has more than that. Nope, nothing. So unfortunately you can't overmatch the bar, but it is a little bit weaker. Now keep in mind, when someone is side scraping, although they are side scraping to effectively have the tracks absorb it or the side just ricochet off, if someone decides to turn their turrets directly back and they leave the side here, keep in mind that the sides of the turret itself are also weaker. So again, you have this small patch of 85. This will be penetratable, as well as it gives you more of a shot towards their commander's hatch if you ever get the side of it. So it is a good opportunity if your opponent is trying to hide himself around the building, side scraping. If he exposes the turret, make sure if it's exposed like this, make sure you try to take a shot right into that commander's hatch. It'll be an easier target than if you were deciding to shoot it frontally. However, that's unfortunate for most people. If you want to go at the rear of this tank, now the turret is fairly well angled. Again, the IS-3 turret is always decent. Keep in mind, don't try to aim at the lower plate of this. It has 2 small plates that are 80 millimeters thick. These are 80 millimeters thick here, and then the rest of the back is actually 65 millimeters. So you should be able to go right through it. For most tier 6s, 7s, and 8 that it has to meet, anything above tier 7 will penetrate it. But just keep in mind, if you're going for that lower plate, there is an extra armor thickness there that you might end up ricocheting off if you're shooting at the rear. So as you can see, most tanks going against the top on artillery. Since we don't have the artillery stun mechanic and have artillery to do full health, I would feel bad for this tank when it actually does get penetrated by artillery, because that might not end well for you. However, that's enough rambling on. Let's get over and head into the gameplay. So, moving into the first replay, and only replay I believe I have of the Kirovets. I only got to play this tank a few bit before I pretty much took a break again from World of Tanks, and this time I'm joined by my buddy Ordinatus Prime in his Volk T44-100. And I forgot to ask him if that was because of Warframe. I always, anytime someone has Prime, I automatically assume it. Either that or they're a huge fan of Transformers, you know. So in this one, we're going to be playing on Runeberg War variants, and I decided I want to go out with a bang. We're low tiers in a tier 10 game. What better way to test the tank when you're really just having fun than just pushing it all the way in? Like really pushing all the way in more than you really want to be. And that's exactly what you're about to see me do. Take advantage of the great mobility of the Kirovets as well, because you can see the Volk T44-100 can probably pretty much keep up with this. He could actually beat me. I was actually surprised I wasn't beating him. And so I decided to push up into an odd position. This would have been a risky move to make for anyone, and the Kirovets managed to pull it off simply because the enemy team did not actually aggressively push towards the center with the lineup of heavy tanks that they had. Instead, what we have is a situation where you have tank destroyers doing a heavy tank roll going against heavy tanks, and the first shot goes right in, and I'm trying to be careful. There's two waffles and I'm not taking any chances and just going for it. When you see two waffles and you have a 122, why not? No, I did have the APCR already loading when I fired the first shot. I forgot to switch to HE, so I fired the second one without switching because I didn't want to go into a huge reload for that. And you can see I'm trying to cram myself up this corner, just trying to get a good angle to be able to use it. And I remember Ordinus was telling me, "Hey, be careful. You don't want to overexpose yourself so the waffle can shoot you." And this is why I hate HE. It trolls you so much. I don't know where that hit. I think it hit on the side of the gun, which is why it only splashed for 231. But I was like, really? This is what this tank comes down to? I am using, I believe, my best crew for this, which is my Object 263's Frozen Butter. That's what we always call it now. And 479. Pretty good shot for 390 alpha gun. Always fun. Man, I love going against waffles when you have 122s and using HE. It's like the perfect mix. Fortunately, 357, I felt like I got robbed. Or was I? No, I think I was using APCR, so I was pretty much good for that. So, you have us here, two tier 8s, just like along. I believe this is a T57 off to my left here. But I was just like, screw it, we're just gonna go in. And the Jagdpanther 100s just deletes that guy. I felt bad for him. And the other guy's not really stacking up that well. And I believe the shot just dropped. I couldn't wait the extra couple seconds or the extra second just for it to zoom all the way in. I didn't time it. Just kind of get to you a little bit, but Unfortunately for Ordinatus, he walked right up into the M53-55 and got shotgunned, but he didn't die, and that was the important part because he was begging for help in his critical time of need. 122 says, "You're mine," sets him on fire. Now, I don't know what it is lately, but I've been coming under some really insane bounce. Penetrate through the front of that. Tiger 2 felt bad. But I've been coming under, I don't know if this has been happening to everyone else, but I've been managing to set people on fire a lot easier lately. Going back for it. Now, I will say this. There was never really a need in this battle for me to switch over to heat rounds. It's always up to the player, and I don't really feel like 221 millimeters of penetration was going to cost me anything. Now, pay attention to this Object 432. Going against a T57, T57 bounces. I do not. 442. Keep in mind, wait for it. He takes out the T57. He was on a one-shot, and unfortunately, Ordinatus, being a tier 8, couldn't seal the deal, and I messed up right here. Couldn't save him. I apologize. I really did. I was like, I'm so sorry. I thought you guys could handle it. There was two of you. Unfortunately for him, the AMX 1390 ended up coming and cleaning up the mess that I didn't finish. This is what happens when you don't finish your meals, kids. You don't get to absorb that extra damage and an extra kill, which made me so disappointed for later on because I think the results. Anyway, we've been having a pretty blast of a time walking through the center of the map. It looks like the enemy team decided to go on the outside, and bravo to this T110E5. Great shot into the ammo rack. I was trying to figure out where he penetrated, and I was just like, okay, cool. Don't side scrape to your left. Unfortunately, apparently that's where the ammo rack is located when you get penetrated in the front. Either that or he got one hell of a shot. I don't know. Now, I have to apologize. I didn't notice it, but I kept noticing it when I was watching the replay again. To the 1390. I didn't back him up in his time of need. I apologize. I wasn't able to catch on. And I have to give him credit. He was putting out, going out for all these guys, and I was pretty much a scaredy cat at that point. He was doing really great for this game. This was a really top-notch game for him, and so I waited too long to pull the trigger, but finally got to it. Now it's third spot 103. Tier 9, I believe, has 40. I can overmatch it with the 122. By just those extra 2mm for the caliber, and boom, and look at that, another fire. I don't know what it was. Like, I've literally been having this problem. I don't know if it's a problem. I like it. Osiris, there you go. Osiris in the AMX 1390. I apologize, buddy. If you ever watch this, you were doing great. You were pretty much cleaning up everything I couldn't do. So far, it's been a crack-up game. 5 kills, and I feel like I got robbed for this one. Now look at it, look at it. Shell velocity lets me down, dude. Shell velocity over past that. It would have hit, but unfortunately the shell went right past in front of that tank, I believe. I did go back and look at it after this match. It was literally by a couple millimeters, just right in front of the tank. However, 4,614 damage dealt, 13 penetrations, 1,600 damage blocked, 5 enemies destroyed. All in all, a great ace tanker for the Scourge Kirovets. 136,153 silver earned, 3,666. Now, I'm gonna let it play because it's gonna scoot on over to the battle detail results, so I can give you the base. But I do run premium time, so that's why my silver earnings are always a little bit higher, as well as the experience earned. Even without premium, the silver, I don't think this is base silver or base experience earned. Come on, a little bit ahead. So 2,222 base experience earned for this tank. Pretty good for an ace tanker, actually. I think I pretty much overshot the ace tanker for this. Top on the team, double what the previous guy did. 17 shots fired, 15 direct hits, and 13 penetrations. I think those HEs really helped in the end for that. 110,642 base silver earned. Then you have the ammunition cost, which is, again, it seems a little bit high. Thank you very much, Scanner. Scanner letting me know my computer's clean. But 17,700 silver for the ammunition, and that is with just... That is actually low. This is without any premium rounds being fired at all. 3,000 for the repair kit for the ammo rack. 9,110. 136 is what I ended up with, but the ammunition cost is definitely one of the things to be wary of. Now, I didn't fire any premium rounds, which helped me a lot, as well as being able to penetrate some of those HE rounds with some high damaging being dealt. I think you guys want to keep that in mind when you're going through with this tank, is because one of the things that tier 8s, especially with the 122s, have that always kind of negates their premium silver bonus is, again, their ammunition cost. So whenever you have a tank that has a great silver bonus, as well as a pretty decent silver shell cost, that's pretty much a great silver earner. Unless you have things like the 252 defender that deals 440 per shot, the silver earnings you get from that with the damage dealt definitely outweighs it. However, the Scourge in this case is not falling too far behind. Again, it put up a great fight in a tier 10 match. I didn't have any problems going against tier 9s and 10s. Even going against a fellow Scourge, as long as you know how to angle your armor and you use it effectively, you should be able to outtrade your enemies most of the time. There are going to be cases where you'll have people, because I've gone against a few of them in the Scourge, that decided, hey, I don't want to use the APCR, I'm going to go with Heat because Heat for a brawling heavy tank. I don't recommend doing that because, one, it cuts into your ammunition, or the ammunition cost, as well as the potential silver earnings for the tank. And I feel like the APCR rounds are definitely fast and a great standard round choice for the tank. Being able to snipe tanks a little bit more of a range than you necessarily have to. Heavy tanks are normally in the front, but again, this tank can definitely play that role with that shell velocity being 1400. Keep that in mind for anything. So, overall, what do I think of the Scourge Kirovets-1? I think it's a great purchase. If you guys decide to pick up this, if you didn't get a chance to pick up the Object 252U or the Defender or any of the other Tier 8 premium heavy tanks, it's not too far behind on the scale. This one definitely, I would say, beats out the IS-6, because even though it doesn't get preferential, it definitely beats it out with the hull design. I like that, as well as the IS-3 turret. Definitely a little bit, slightly above the IS-5 and the Fatherland and IS-3A, just because of the, I want to say, in my opinion, the shell velocity for the tanks, and I think they have 1,425, but I felt that the top speed of this tank definitely helped beat it out compared to the Fatherlands. The Glory IS-5, I know pretty much everybody hates the penetration, so every time I go against one, I always get fired with premium. I don't necessarily know if that's just because people choose it by default. The Defender is definitely going to be the best competitor for this tank. If you have a choice between the Defender and this, I would say the Defender beats it out. However, that's not to say that the Scourge itself doesn't have its benefits. Again, that 15% experience bonus definitely will help you in the long run when you're using that against a Defender. But if you're going for straight silver earnings, it falls behind. But I do recommend the tank if you ever have a chance to pick it up. If you guys see it in the store and you're wondering about it, thank you guys for checking out the video. I hopefully it was helpful in you guys deciding in picking up the tank. And I'll catch you guys in the next tank review. Have a good night.